The ocean stretched endlessly before him, shimmering under the golden hues of the setting sun. Cristiano Ronaldo stood barefoot on the warm sand, the salty breeze brushing against his face. For once there were no roaring crowds, no flashing cameras, just the rhythm of the waves and the distant laughter of children playing along the shore. This was why he had chosen this secluded village for his vacation: anonymity, peace, and a chance to breathe. He had wandered farther than usual that evening, drawn by the faint scent of grilled fish and the sound of hushed voices. At the edge of the village, past a row of weathered boats, he spotted an elderly man sitting alone by a makeshift fire. The old fisherman's face was carved by time, his hands rough from years of toil. His clothes were worn, his frame frail, yet his eyes held a quiet dignity. A small group of villagers gathered around him, their expressions a mixture of concern and gratitude. Curious, Ronaldo lingered in the shadows, listening. The fisherman, they said, was once the heart of this village. For decades he had spent his mornings out at sea, pulling in nets heavy with fish, only to give them away to those who had none. He had never asked for money, never expected anything in return. The sea provides enough for all, he used to say, and so he shared freely, ensuring that no family in the village went hungry. But life had been unkind to him. An illness had stolen his strength, leaving him unable to sail. His once powerful arms, accustomed to hauling heavy nets from the depths of the ocean, had grown weak and wiry. The hands that had mended torn fishing lines now trembled, unable to grip as they once did. Without the ability to fish, he had nothing left, no means to sustain himself, no purpose to wake up to each morning. The vibrant man who had once commanded the tides now found himself a prisoner on the shore, watching the waters he loved from a distance. Now, he lived on the kindness of the very people he once fed. The villagers did what they could, slipping him portions of their own meagre catches, leaving baskets of bread and fruit outside his small hut. Some brought him food when they could, but times were hard and there was only so much they could spare. Even in their generosity, he saw the strain on their faces, the silent apologies in their eyes when they had nothing to give. He never complained, never begged, but the weight of helplessness bore down on him, heavier than any net he had ever carried. The man who had once given so much now had nothing. Ronaldo felt a lump form in his throat. He had grown up knowing struggle. He had felt the sting of hunger, the weight of sacrifice. He had seen his mother work herself to exhaustion so that he could chase his dreams, and now, standing there, listening to the villagers speak of this man's quiet generosity, something inside him stirred. The old fisherman did not recognize him. Perhaps he had never watched a football match in his life. That, Ronaldo realized, was a gift. He could help, truly help, without expectation, without fanfare. But he needed to be careful. If the villagers knew who he was, if the old man discovered his identity, the purity of his gesture would be lost. That night he lay awake, staring at the ceiling of his rented villa, mind racing. He could simply give the fisherman money, but he knew pride was a complicated thing. Some people would rather starve than accept charity. He needed a different approach, something lasting, something dignified. The next morning, Ronaldo visited the harbour, speaking in hushed tones to the local boatmaker. The boatmaker, a grizzled man with hands calloused from years of craftsmanship, listened intently as Ronaldo explained his idea. He nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what was being asked. Together they walked along the docks, inspecting old vessels, debating which could be salvaged. They finally settled on a sturdy, time-worn boat, its hull cracked but still strong, its spirit unbroken, much like the fisherman himself. By the afternoon, arrangements were made. Over the next few days, unseen by the fisherman, a small transformation took place. The boatmaker and his apprentices worked tirelessly, sanding down the worn wood, applying fresh coats of paint, and ensuring the vessel was seaworthy once more. New nets were brought in, woven carefully by the village's elders, their fingers moving deftly over the rope as they whispered blessings into the fibres. Fishing gear was quietly replaced, rods and hooks set aside as if waiting for the call of the sea. The plan was simple. The boat would be gifted to the village, not to the fishermen alone. It would be a shared resource, a way for the community to thrive together. And in doing so, the fisherman could return to the sea, not as a burden, but as a mentor to the younger men who now needed guidance. He would not be given charity. he would be given purpose, and that, Ronaldo knew, was the greatest gift of all. The day of the reveal was a quiet one. The villagers were called to the shore, the fisherman among them. As he approached, the hush of the crowd deepened. Then he saw it. The boat, gleaming in the sunlight, its fresh coat of paint a stark contrast to the worn, faded memory of his past vessel. His breath hitched. He stopped in his tracks, staring, as if afraid that if he blinked it would all disappear. The hands that had once wielded nets with ease trembled as they ran along the freshly polished wood, feeling the grain, the strength, the promise of the sea calling to him once more. A young boy, no older than 10, tugged at the fisherman's sleeve and pointed at the boat. "It's yours," he whispered excitedly. The old man's knees nearly buckled. Someone stepped forward, clearing their throat, and spoke of how the village had pooled its efforts, how an anonymous benefactor had made it all possible. Murmurs of gratitude rippled through the crowd, but the fisherman could hardly hear them. His eyes glistened, and for a moment he was silent. He looked at the young men standing beside him, those who had watched him fish as children and now towered over him as men. He saw the eager glint in their eyes, the yearning to learn, to follow in his footsteps. He inhaled sharply, his chest rising with newfound strength. Then, with a voice thick with emotion, he said, "The sea provides enough for all." A roar of approval echoed along the shore, hands clapped on backs, tears wiped away discreetly. The old fisherman climbed aboard, running his hands over the oars, the nets, the ropes. He was home. From a distance, Ronaldo watched, his cap pulled low over his eyes. He didn't need thanks. He didn't need recognition. He only needed to know that a man who had given so much could once again stand with dignity. As the old fisherman stepped aboard, the village erupted in quiet cheers, their joy carrying over the waves. And with that, Ronaldo turned and walked away, the ocean breeze at his back, his heart a little lighter than before.